In today's video, you're going to learn everything you need to know regarding the CSS box model. We're going to go through all four parts of the box model: the content box, padding box, border box, and margin box. We'll go into that in a little more depth if that sounds like a lot to you, but it's really not too bad. Then we're going to look at this chart from Mozilla Developer Network. That is a very helpful chart. And then we'll get into some examples here of what this looks like with some live code, because I am in a CSS file right here, and I will show you how this works kind of when styling an actual application here. So first off, what is the CSS box model? Well, you can think of everything in CSS as having a box around it. So all of your HTML elements, you can think of them as a box, at least in the reference to CSS. And this box model provides a framework for working with and styling these boxes, as well as kind of spacing these boxes apart, adding different margins to these boxes, and different things like that. Okay, so the CSS box model is made up of four different parts. It has the content box, the padding box, the border box, and the margin box. And this will make more sense when I show you an example here in just a bit. But the content box, this is where your content is displayed. So if you have an H1 with some text in it, the content box is going to surround your text where that content is actually displayed. And you can adjust your content box with a few different properties within CSS. This is going to be like things like your width, your height, your min width, max width, and different things like that. Next up, we have the padding box, and this is going to sit just around your content. So if you have that H1 with some text within it, well, your padding box, it's going to be surrounding your content. It's going to be immediately outside of your content box. And you can adjust this in CSS by using the properties of padding top, padding left, padding right, so on and so forth. Next up, we have the border box. And your border box is going to wrap around your content and any of the padding. So it's going to be your content, then your padding, then your border box is going to sit around any padding if you have any padding. And you can adjust this with the border properties of CSS. So border bottom, border width, so on and so forth. And then finally, we have the margin box. And the margin box is going to be the outermost layer. And it's going to wrap your content, padding, and border. So content, padding, border, margin. All right. Those are the four different layers of this box model. And this is just going to act as kind of white space between your different elements that you're going to have. And you can adjust this using the margin properties. So margin top, bottom, left, right, so on and so forth. So let's look here at an MDN chart that kind of displays this really well. So here in this chart, you can see that just like what I was saying, this right here is the box model, and it has these four different layers. Right here in the middle, this is going to be your content. So if I had an H1 with some text, my text would be right within this content box here. And then the next layer is going to be your padding. That is going to be just some extra room or some extra space between your content and its border. All right, so the second layer is your padding here. And then the third layer is going to be your border. So you can add some border, and you can see how that wraps around all of your content and all of your padding. And then the final layer is your margin, which is just going to be white space that's going to wrap around all of your border, padding, and content. All right, so that's the outermost layer. So right now I'm going to be styling this HTML, which is just going to be three different boxes: box 1, box 2, box 3. And they have the classes of box 1, box 2, box 3. And then in my CSS here, you can see that I'm styling box 1, box 2, and box 3. And right now I'm just giving them all a width and a height so they show up on the page, and then a background color so you can see them. So if we check out my page here, we see three immaculately styled boxes here. All right. Now let's play around with these different properties and see how this changes our CSS. So for box 1 here, let's first start with playing around with some padding here. So I'm going to add, just using the padding property. So this is actually going to add padding on all 4 sides of my content. Let's do 20 pixels of padding and see what effect that has. Okay, so now you see for this first box here, now my text, it isn't right up next to my edge of my box here. It actually has a little bit of padding here in between. And it also makes my box a little bit larger, as now my width and height are adding some of this padding to it. And if we want to see what this looks like, you can right click on your web page and you can hit inspect. And I'll open up my inspector here. And then within my inspector, I'm going to look at this element. And then as you can see how it has this little green outline around it and it says padding 20 pixels. Well, right now it's showing me where that padding is at. And it is going to be everything that you see here in green. That is the padding of this element here. All right. So it's going to be the content and then the padding. And then since I don't have a border and margin, it's not going to show any of that because it doesn't exist right now. All right. So you can see this is where the padding is being added. So let me go ahead and head back to my code editor. And for box 2, let's go ahead and add a border. And I'm going to do 10 pixel solid black. So this is going to add a border of 10 pixels of solid black border all the way around my box number 2. So now you can see box 2, it has this border around it. And let's head back. And for box 3 here, let's add some margin. So let's do 20 pixels of margin on all 4 sides of this box here. And now you can see, okay, these are the different effects that this has. So for the padding here, it adds space between the content and the edge of the box here. So the padding is just outside of the content. But as you can see, it doesn't separate this first box at all from this second box because I still haven't added any margin, because you can see that in box 3, this is where I add margin to all 4 sides of this. And if I inspect this element, you're going to see that it has a margin of 20 pixels around it. And you can see it now has this white space gap here between box 3 and box 2 because the margin occurs on the complete outside of an element. All right. So you can see how the padding adds more kind of margin within the element or more white space within the element to separate the content from the edge of your CSS box. And then in box 3, it's still right up next to my box here, or right up next to the edge. But since I add margin, it adds some space between the boxes here, and as well as between the edge of kind of my web page. So now let's kind of put these all together on this first box. And now I'm going to add a border of 10 pixels, solid black, and then we'll also add a margin of 20 pixels to this. And now you can see all of these properties kind of working together here. So now for my first box, you see that I have my content right here. This is the first part of the 4-layer box model. And then between this content and my border, you can see that I have padding because padding is the second layer. And then my third layer here is going to be my border surrounding my padding as well as my content. And then now you see that it has some white space between box 1 and box 2 because I added some margin. So that's going to separate these boxes from each other. If I inspect this here, you're going to now see, okay, well, we have the content in the middle in the blue, and then we have the green represent my padding, and then you can see the black border there, and then you can see the margin between the box here as well as along the side here. So that shows you how you can kind of lay out your elements and change how they look significantly using these 4 different layers within the CSS box model. So you can think of all of your HTML elements as it relates to CSS as different boxes. And these boxes are made up of 4 different layers. You have your content box, which is where your content is displayed. It's the innermost layer. And then surrounding your content is going to be your padding box. which is going to add some separation between your content and kind of the outside or the edge of your box. And then your border box is the third layer that wraps around your content and your padding. And then your margin box is going to be your outermost layer, which is where you can kind of add some white space between different elements on your page. So coming soon, we're going to cover display block versus inline block and inline and different things that you can do here, as well as positional properties in CSS and a whole bunch more. So make sure you're subscribed for that, and I will see you in that next one.